Coming up on Network Africa. Gambian president unveils new cabinet and replaces vice president. Togo agrees to mediate in Mali political crisis. Plus, South Africa extends COVID-19 regulations following a surge in cases. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Teniola Shoboale. We begin in the Gambia, where President Adama Barrow was appointed a new cabinet, replacing the country's vice president and key ministers. Aliud Badara Juf, a former education minister, has been named the new vice president, replacing Dr. Isatu Ture. 11 ministers were retained in the new 23-member cabinet that includes 3 women. Modu Sise was named the chief of staff, a new position created in the cabinet. President Barrow was sworn in for a second 5-year term in January. Togolese President Faure Gnassingbé has agreed to act as a mediator in Mali's political crisis. Mali has been mired in a crisis since the military seized power in 2020 and has been under pressure to return the country to democratic rule. There has been growing tension between the junta and the international partners, including the worsening of Mali's relations with its former colonial power, France. The West African regional bloc, ECOWAS, has imposed sanctions on the country, including freezing its assets. Earlier, Mali's Foreign Minister Abdoulaye Diop met his Togolese counterpart Robert Dussey in Lomé to seek Togo's support in discussions with the international community. Meanwhile, Germany says it will end its participation in the EU training mission in Mali, but says it's ready to continue with the UN peacekeeping mission in the country under certain conditions. The decision announced by the country's defense minister comes a month after Human Rights Watch accused Malian troops and suspected Russian fighters of executing around 300 civilian men in central Mali town. The West African country's army has denied the allegations. Mali and Russia have previously said the Russians in the country are trainers helping local troops with equipment brought from Russia. Germany says it's willing to continue its participation in the MINUSMA's peacekeeping mission if the UN made sure that shortfalls created by the French withdrawal are filled to ensure the safety of German soldiers. And following this week's deadly attack on African Union troops in Somalia by al-Shabaab militants, the continental body has offered its heartfelt condolences to the families of the dead. A statement did not confirm how many soldiers were killed. The militants had said that more than 170 AU soldiers had died, mostly Burundian soldiers. The AU mission in Somalia has, however, confirmed that the base in the Middle Shabelle region was staffed by Burundian peacekeepers, and its spokesman offered his condolences to the government and people of Burundi. The Burundian army has said 10 of its soldiers died and another 5 are missing. And in South Africa, mining companies in the country have resorted to trucking coal to ports to meet a surge in demand from Europe since the war in Ukraine started. The companies are bypassing the deteriorating rail infrastructure they blame for billions of dollars in lost revenue.
This is what mining companies in South Africa have resorted to. Trucking coal to ports in order to meet a surge in European demand since the war in Ukraine started. The switch to trucking bypasses the deteriorating rail infrastructure that companies said cost billions of dollars in revenue. Poor maintenance, lack of spare parts for trains, copper cable theft and vandalism have disrupted state logistics firm Transnet's freight rail services, causing coal and iron ore exports to fall in recent years.
March of 2021, we started experiencing issues with Transnet, the availability of the trains, them being able to give us the sufficient amount of trains required to move our product from the mines, from this mine and the other mines within the Menor Group. We then decided to start transporting to Richards Bay specifically with trucks, because at that point there was a turn in the market. The coal price increased quite significantly.
According to Hallett, trucking coal cost about 4 times more than rail.
When we started trucking, the volumes were not as high as they are at the moment. At that point in time, the situation in Transnet was still of such a nature that we could move sufficient amount, not our full demand, but still sufficient volumes we were able to move. As the situation within Transnet went backwards, we unfortunately had to ramp up the trucking, and we are moving quite a lot of coal.
At Canyon Coal's Kanye Colliery, it takes about 80 trucks, each carrying over 37 tons, to replace one average Transnet train, making it unsustainable financially, as well as boosting emissions and clogging roads.
We are, aware that there's been an increase in the number of trucks. Of coal trucks now running into the port, and that's not a good situation. And for me, it's not a good situation for the country, more than anything in terms of the damage to the roads and congestion, on the roads as well.
The record coal prices means miners can absorb the cost of trucking for now. Demand for coal has shut up since the war in Ukraine started. The European Union has announced a ban on Russian coal, and mining companies in South Africa say they are fielding calls from European countries looking for imports.
In Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, the Wiru Primate Rehabilitation Center gives chimpanzees and monkeys a safe place to recover after they are rescued from the hands of poachers or illegal owners who try to domesticate them. The presence of militias in the parks has made these centers work harder, as renewed violence means they cannot release the animals back into their natural habitat when they're ready.
112 chimpanzees and 118 small monkeys are now safe and sound in a sanctuary caring for the orphan primates that fell victim to the poaching and wildlife trade in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Every chimpanzee resident here in the Wiru Primate Rehabilitation Center was brutally taken from their forest home by poachers. A young chimpanzee wrapped his arms around the neck of his rescuer in a brief hug as he was released from a wooden cage, then scampered out to play in a spacious new enclosure. Agents from the Democratic Republic of Congo's Nature Conservation Agency had seized the chimp from an illegal owner and brought him more than 600 kilometers by road, boat, and plane. According to conservationists, poachers often kill a young chimp's whole family in order to capture it.
It's horrible because the year 2021 was the worst year in the history of our center. We had 15 arrivals, and you have to think that for every chimpanzee that arrives here at the sanctuary, there are 10 more that died in the forest. In any case, the situation is serious. We know that there are other chimpanzees that need to be saved, so if we do nothing, if we do not act to protect the forest, soon it will be empty.
Democratic Republic of Congo and neighboring Congo Republic host the largest number of great apes in Africa, but most species are declining in population because of a combination of factors such as forest burning, hunting, and trafficking, and according to the latest reports by the Great Apes Survival Partnership.
There are already groups of apes that are ready to be reintegrated, but the presence of armed groups in the forest is blocking us. These armed groups reside in their natural environment, in the forest. There is also poaching that continues. It is difficult to reintegrate the animals as long as there are still these armed groups in the forest.
Eastern Congo has been beset by militia violence for decades, but some armed groups have seen a resurgence in recent years, leading the government to declare martial law in parts of the east. Although there's no evidence that the illegal trade in great apes is linked to armed groups, the United Nations-led GRASP says their presence in the forest still constitutes a threat to the area's ape.
Mozambique is planning a new law that will regulate churches' activities, impose taxes on them, and require them to have a minimum number of 200 signatures in order to register. Justice, Constitutional and Religious Affairs Minister Elena Kida says a government analysis had revealed warning signs amid a runaway proliferation of churches. Mozambique has a total of 900 officially registered religious denominations, but a lot more exist. The Christian Council of Mozambique is backing most of the provisions of the proposed law, saying it recognizes that the government wants to bring order. Some updates on the COVID-19 pandemic now. The World Health Organization says global reported cases and deaths are continuing to decline, with reported weekly deaths at their lowest since March 2020. WHO's Director General Tedros Ghebreyesus says that driven by Omicron subvariants, there's an increase in reported cases in the Americas and Africa. South African scientists who identified Omicron late last year have now reported two more Omicron subvariants as a reason for a spike in cases in the country.
Globally, reported cases and deaths from COVID-19 are continuing to decline, with reported weekly deaths at their lowest since March 2020. But these trends, while welcome, don't tell the full story. Driven by Omicron subvariants, we're seeing an increase in reported cases in Americas and Africa. The South African scientists who identified Omicron late last year have now reported two more Omicron subvariants, BA4 and BA5, as the reason for a spike in cases in South Africa. It's too soon to know whether these new subvariants can cause more severe disease than other Omicron subvariants. But early data suggests vaccination remains protective against severe disease and death. Testing and sequencing remain absolutely critical. The BA4 and BA5 subvariants were identified because South Africa is still doing the vital genetic sequencing that many other countries have stopped doing. In many countries, we're essentially blind to how the virus is mutating. We don't know what's coming next. Coupled with low investment in early diagnosis, it's simply not acceptable that in worst pandemic in a century, innovative treatments that can save lives are not reaching those that need them. We're playing with a fire that continues to burn us. Meanwhile, manufacturers are posting record profits. WHO supports fair reward for innovation. But we cannot accept prices that make life-saving treatments available to the rich and out of reach for the poor. This is a moral failing.
We'll return in just a moment. We'll have more on the COVID-19 pandemic. Plus, villagers mistake a plastic bag for a lion in Kenya. More in a moment. Please stay with us. Thanks for staying with us. Still on the COVID-19 pandemic, South Africa's health department has extended COVID-19 regulations following an increase in infections in the country. Regulations that are in place include compulsory wearing of face masks. Gatherings are permitted at 50% of the venue capacity or 1,000 for indoor gatherings. For those who are unvaccinated, they need to provide a COVID test not older than 72 hours. And for vaccinated persons, they need to provide provide a valid certificate. Travellers who are unvaccinated and coming into South Africa need to also produce a negative COVID test, and for those who have been vaccinated upon arrival, they need to produce a valid certificate. Recently, South Africa has been seeing an increase in positive cases daily. The majority of these cases are from 3 provinces, being Gauteng with 53%, KwaZulu-Natal with 23%, and Western Cape with 11%. Channels Television South Africa correspondent Brian Bugeni joins us now for more on this. Brian, speak to us about the reactions these new measures are getting. How are South Africans reacting?
Well, we're getting mixed reactions from South African citizens and experts alike. The general public, most people moving on with their lives because most of the restrictions had been reduced and been changed in the past couple of months. So most people really just going with the flow of what the department is saying, though there are some new changes which people did say that they're excited and happy about. The fact that gatherings now have got a 50% capacity allowed to go to certain events. So that's very good for people to go outdoors, spend time with people they haven't seen in a long time. For churches as well, church leaders who've been crying foul, saying that they can't have a lot of people in their churches, they're restricted. So 50% capacity is a bit better than what they've been getting all along, especially for mega churches. So we're getting like those people, especially the religious leaders, very, very happy at the moment. Though we got mixed reactions, like I said earlier before. A scientist, a vaccinologist at the Wits University, Professor Madi, saying that some of these restrictions, for lack of a better word, what he used, he said are stupid. The government he's saying that the government should just let go of the restrictions because the virus itself has changed, has mutated so many times that the restrictions we had in the beginning of COVID are no longer very effective as they were in the beginning. So he's saying that most of these restrictions should be let go and let go of. So we're just waiting to see what they're going to say in the next couple of months because the Department of Health saying that they're coming back on the 5th of July to come back and address the nation to say how far these new regulations will be taken.
And there were talks of a 5th wave last week amid a rise in cases. Has this officially been declared by authorities?
Well, talks of a 5th wave have been very rife in the country, seeing that the numbers have been increasing, but it has not been declared officially that we are entering or we have entered a 5th wave, but talk of that is very rife. A few citizens also being skeptical, thinking that we're going back to another type of lockdown. So people are really not sure at the moment what's going to happen, but it has not been officially declared by government, but it's been talk going and making the rounds at the moment.
Okay, and Brian, while we're seeing a rise in cases, has there been any change to the number of hospitalizations or deaths?
Well, we've seen quite a huge increase in the new cases of positive cases, but what we're not seeing a lot is the death rate rising very high. The death rate is very low at the moment, though we do receive a few deaths on a daily basis, but it's not as high as it was at the peak of the virus, and hospitalizations are not as high as what the government, what the department is saying. They're saying that hospitalizations are not as high. Most of the cases, what we're hearing, are mild, asymptomatic cases. So at the moment, it's just the increase in numbers, but hospitalizations and deaths is still quite low.
And in terms of the vaccination drive in the country, are people still coming out to get vaccinated, or is that slowed?
According to the Department of Health, the vaccination drive has really slowed down. Well, at the moment, almost 35 million people have been vaccinated since the vaccination drive has started. But most of these are people who got vaccinated last year when the vaccination drive was at its highest. But at the moment, we're seeing the numbers very decreasing on a daily, which has the department and the president himself, who's been trying to push the vaccination drive, worried, and they are saying people should continue continue to go and vaccinate, as this is one of the main areas where we can fight this COVID virus pandemic at the moment. But what we are hearing as well is that the factory which produces vaccines, there's been talk that it might shut down because there is no demand for the vaccine as much as government had hoped for. People now very skeptical, or some people who have received their jabs not going either for their second jabs or for their booster jabs. So at the moment, the vaccination drive is quite at a minimal, and which has got government and the Department of Health are very worried.
All right then, Brian, thanks a lot for the update. Away from South Africa, the Popo Carnival is a cultural event celebrated every year in the Ivorian city of Bonua, about 50 kilometers east of the capital Abidjan, which has its origins in the traditions of the Abore ethnic group. Over 2 weeks during the Easter period, some 2 million people come to the city to witness the traditional dances, costumes, and celebrations. Take a look.
Men beating drums and blowing ox horns sounded the arrival of the King of Ivory Coast Abure people, who waved as hundreds of onlookers lined the roadside and sat on the roofs of buildings to catch a glimpse. Wearing a gold crown and a long patterned robe, the king was taking part in a parade at the Popo Carnival, a cultural festival held every year which organizers say attracts more than 1 million people over 2 weeks. The event already draws some visitors from Europe and the United States, and some locals hope it could get even bigger.
It's our dream that one day our children and our grandchildren could transform this carnival into the Carnival of Rio de Janeiro.
The Abure are one of many ethnic groups in the West African country, some of which still have kings and queens that play a traditional role in their communities. The Abure king acts as the chief of 7 villages. Popo means mask in the Abure language. The carnival includes a football match, a beauty contest, and theatrical performances, all culminating in a grand parade. This year, 33-year-old Albertine Ammon is crowned winner of the beauty contest.
Honestly, I am very happy, and I thank all those who came to support me.
Jean Oba, honorary commissioner of the festival, which is held in Bonua, about 50 kilometers east of Ivory Coast's main city, Abidjan, says the festival allows the people of Abure to value their culture in general.
It's a period of evaluation to see if we haven't lost anything our parents left us.
Along with the king and his entourage, the procession includes brass bands, mass dance troupes, colorfully decorated floats, groups of young men disguised as women, and groups of young mothers.
And finally on the programme, something more to put a smile on your face. There was a scare in Kenyana village in Meru County, central Kenya this week, after villagers believed there was a lion hiding in a flower hedge. The supposed lion was spotted by a farm hand at a homestead who raised the alarm, and the authorities were notified and wildlife wardens summoned. But it turns out the feared big cat was a picture of a lion printed on a plastic shopping bag. The owner of the homestead had last week returned from with avocado seedlings in the plastic bag after attending a farmer training session in Murunga town. On arrival, she decided to place the seedlings in a place where they wouldn't dry up and ended up placing the bag between her house and a flower hedge. The farm hand, who was returning from cutting grass for livestock, noticed what he believed looked like a lion and raised the alarm. The homeowner was called and she explained details of the shopping bag and its content, well, to the relief of the gathered villagers. Well, as the saying goes, it's better to be safe than sorry. And that's the programme today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Teniola Shoboale.